Cold cases, missing persons, unsolved crimes. This is a Monday Night Mystery with Mitch McCoy.
Welcome into Monday Night Mystery. I'm Mitch McCoy, and we are on a very interesting case tonight. We're looking into the deaths of two people. One, a pregnant woman and a mother of a 2-year-old, and a man, a 27-year-old man, and this is a cold case. It's a Pulaski County Sheriff's Office cold case, and I want to get right to our panel tonight. We have Latricia Woodruff. She is a law enforcement and a communications expert. We also have Kelly Ward tonight, a former Pulaski County prosecutor, and we have Lieutenant Mike Blaine from the Pulaski County Sheriff's Office. All good evening to you. Lieutenant Mike Blaine, it's always good to see you. Former co-worker, I might add. Before we get to the panel, I want to get to Latricia. Latricia, this case screams just complete heartless. I don't even know the words to use, to be quite honest with you.
You're right. It's hard to find the words to convey how this case makes anyone feel. It was back in 2012, which is a little over 9 years ago, that 24-year-old Alexis Crawford, who was 5 months pregnant at the time, along with Herman Hill, who's 27 years old, were found shot to death in a home on Reed Road near North Little Rock, just outside of North Little Rock in Pulaski County. There was a 2-year-old in the house when this all happened. That 2-year-old was found unharmed, but as you can imagine, losing his mother and possibly seeing what happened, the child is probably traumatized. So we're here tonight to talk about this case and hopefully bring it back up, shed some light on it so that we can generate some more leads. Now, I understand that there were some suspects in the case when this happened, but there was never enough to bring anyone to justice, to arrest anyone in this case. So we're hoping that someone out there is watching and they feel for this family and for that child who was 2 years old at the time, and to come forward with some information that will help solve this case.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that is why we are on the case tonight. And I want to get to Lieutenant Mike Blaine. He is the lieutenant over the Criminal Investigations Division at the Pulaski County Sheriff's Office. Lieutenant, good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. Walk us through the very latest on this case and what's happening at the Sheriff's Office related to this 2012 cold case.
Well, unfortunately, we haven't had a whole lot of information come to us in the last quite a while in regards to this case. One thing we've been doing with our cold cases is certainly appealing to the public on anniversary dates, and this was one of them that on May 6th, we did a posting in regards to this case, appealing to the public for any information. Now, you mentioned about suspects in this case. We did have had generated some leads in the case early on, but unfortunately not enough physical evidence or information that we obtained were able to specifically direct us to a one key suspect and ultimately enough for criminal charges. But and that unfortunately occurs in a lot of homicide cases that eventually, after a period of time, wind up going cold, as we call it. But it's never closed. They're never lost and not out of our sights or out of our minds. Particularly, we want to keep that involved with the community to know about these cases and develop any other leads that we either haven't come across or may have even overlooked, for that matter.
We're looking at file video of stories that we did previously with the family of Alexis Crawford. Worth noting, the man you saw in that photo when we were rolling that video is a man by the name of Herman Hill. He's 27. Also, both of the victims were found dead inside of a home off of Reed Road. That's just outside of North Little Rock in Pulaski County. You see that hashtag there at the bottom of your screen? It's hashtag Monday Night Mystery. Feel free, if you're watching us on Facebook, leave your question, leave your comment using the hashtag Monday Night Mystery, and you can interact with everyone. We can bring your question into our show tonight, and we can discuss your questions or comments. I want to get back to Mike Blaine, a lieutenant at Pulaski County Sheriff's Office, because you mentioned that there were some possible persons of interest or people that you were looking at, but there just wasn't enough evidence to seal the deal. What does that mean for people who are joining us now? And is it one of those situations that if somebody's watching, they might have a little bit of information and they could help provide context, and that could be what you need to seal this case? Tell me a little bit about what's happening from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Majority of a lot of homicide cases are solved by people talking, witnesses coming forward and communicating what they do know, whether they were a part of the scene, actually saw the crime, or just a near witness later after the fact to those individuals that are talking amongst friends or just in social concepts. But and that's kind of what we're lacking. We're lacking of additional information coming forward that they know about this because of this person talking, or other situations where information has been relayed regarding to this crime. The physical evidence in itself does paint the picture of what happened at the crime, but not necessarily always points a finger as to exactly who is the person who's the cause of it. So that's kind of where we're at, where a lot of these cases are solved by people just coming forward and giving us information that we didn't know existed.
I want to get to Kelly Ward, former Pulaski County prosecutor. Kelly, good evening to you. Thanks for tagging along with us tonight. What goes through, what's this process like when the sheriff's office says, well, we have a person of interest, but we just don't have enough? Is that, who makes that decision on when to file charges and decides, if there's enough evidence to go ahead and prosecute?
Well, it can be kind of a joint effort. You can, there's open communication usually between the law enforcement agency and the prosecuting attorney's office. They will talk about the case, give, facts, here's what the evidence is, here's the evidence that we hope to get, or here's what we might want to check out. And then the prosecuting attorney might suggest other evidence that they might need to track down or people to interview. But as far as formal charges, the filing of felony information in Arkansas, the prosecuting attorney makes that decision what to file formally in a felony information. So it really is, it's a joint effort. It's not exactly, one over the other when you're in this investigative stage. Certainly law enforcement puts forth the effort in investigating, and they do so with that open line of communication, usually with the prosecuting attorney's office. So, Lieutenant Blaine's explanation of, we have people we talk to, we may have had persons of interest, but we just don't have enough information to go forward. It's very important to note that when you do go forward and when you file formal charges, the prosecuting attorney wants to be sure that they have the evidence that they need to go forward, because once you do institute charges, there are lots of things that happen. Everything gets sped up. You've got a speedy trial obligation that you have to bring that person to trial within 1 year. You've got the court process starts, and so you don't want to start out behind the eight ball, so to speak, where as you charge someone and then you get halfway through the case and you realize, we might need more evidence. So that's always something to think about, and it's always important to make sure that you have everything that you're going to need before you file those formal charges. And
not to mention, you only have one chance at it too.
That's correct. That's correct. And if you start and then it ends up that you don't have enough evidence, then that could mess up any future cases as well.
If you're just joining us tonight, we are talking about Alexis Crawford. She was 24 years old, pregnant, also a mother of a 2-year-old at the time. When she died, there was also a man involved in this homicide. He died at the scene, Herman Hill, 27 years old as well. Certainly just a heartbreaking case as we talk about these two deaths. I want to get back to Lieutenant Mike Blaine, Lieutenant at the Pulaski County Sheriff's Office. Lieutenant, how did this call come in? How did all of this start?
Well, it was unfortunate. It was found by a neighbor. He had actually come over to visit Mr. Hill. And when he walked in, he noticed that the front door was ajar. And when he came in, he found Mr. Hill deceased. And of course, at that point, he backed out and then contacted us directly. Once patrol got there, then the scene was secured, and it was determined that both individuals within the home were deceased.
And let's go to Latricia Woodruff, a law enforcement and communications expert. Latricia, what happens from there? Lieutenant Mike Blaine was talking about the scene is secured. Obviously, you immediately take that witness in, the neighbor specifically, into questioning because that person might hold a lot of information.
Yes, you definitely take that person in because, as you stated, that person may hold a lot of information. What made that person even go to the house? Things like that. How well did this person know them? Did they know of anyone who was maybe upset with one of these two people who were found murdered inside the home? But you also want to get that child out of there. A 2-year-old was inside of that house. Now, it's pretty hard most often to get any information from a 2-year-old, but did the child say anything about, maybe somebody that he knew, a name or anything like that? But, it's a 2-year-old again, you're probably not going to get a whole lot out of them. But you look into the relationships. I don't know the relationship between Alexis and Herman Hill. Lieutenant Blaine can probably answer that question. But what kind of relationship did they have? Was there someone mad at either one of them that could have brought this to their doorstep? So there's a lot of questions to ask. Any other neighbors, that they hear anything, that they see anything? And even in light of this, after this happened, maybe they started thinking, well, about that time I saw a car leaving the area, or I saw a person running from the area, or I just saw some suspicious activity that I did not think of until I found out this happened. So a lot of questions to be asked there about what was going on and what happened in the days before. What were they into, or who they visited with, or who came to their home in the days before this all happened. So lots of questions to ask. But yes, definitely starting with the witness, the neighbor, the person that actually found the bodies.
Let's go back to what Latricia Woodruff just said. Yes, Alexis's 2-year-old son was found alive inside the home. The child was unharmed. And I want to get back to Lieutenant Mike Blaine. Again, he is the lieutenant over the Criminal Investigations Division at the Pulaski County Sheriff's Office. Lieutenant, what happened with the child inside that home? I'm assuming that I know you guys are trained, highly trained. Did you guys bring extra people in to help try and talk with that child? How does that work with somebody so young?
Yeah, what actually transpired with this, and this is something we would do in any case, is that child was transported directly to Arkansas Children's Hospital. So the child was examined and then also spoken to by trained interviewers with the Arkansas Children's Hospital that know how to deal with kids that have not only witnessed trauma but also been a part of trauma themselves. And so that was conducted. Of course, unfortunately, being 2 years old, just what Latricia had says, that he wasn't able to yield a whole lot of information being that young. But precautions were made with that child to secure him and make sure he's safe and he's okay, as he is the one and only living witness that we had in regards to this case.
And do you guys talk with Arkansas Children's Hospital throughout that process if there's follow-up questions, or do you try and circle back with that child maybe a year later, 2 years later as he gets older, or how does that work?
Yes, and actually during that process, there's an investigator that's assigned to be in that position as well, to be there at the hospital during that process. Particularly with this case here, it was later also talked to with the family that he still did not relay or retain any information from that night, because that was visited a period of time afterwards. So still, unfortunately, there's no clarity as to who the individual was that came into the home and committed this horrible act.
I want to get to Kelly Ward, former prosecutor. Kelly, you have prosecuted countless amounts of violent offenders. What do you make out of just hearing the details that are public, at least? What do you make out of the fact that the child was unharmed? Because there are a lot of cases that the children are hurt in these cases. This child was unharmed, thankfully. Thank God. What do you make out of that?
Well, it could be several things. It would just be a guess, but the child could have been in a different room, a different part of the home when the shooting occurred. The child could have been near his mother, but just somehow, luckily, fortunately, was spared. So it's just hard to know or to guess as to why. Thank goodness that this child was unharmed. When you think about talking to kids, and I just kind of wanted to kind of circle back to what Lieutenant Blaine said, because I did a lot of training and I did forensic interviewing when I was a prosecutor, because unfortunately, we would have cases where we would have to have child witnesses. We had child victims and that sort of thing. So one thing that they would do, it's called a forensic interview that you can do with the child, and they do it at Children's Hospital. They do a great job. They have a whole process that they set up with specifically trained workers that can talk to kids, and they have a procedure and a way to talk to them that's not traumatic. It's in a room that is very kid friendly. It's a kid friendly atmosphere. It's not in, where you go to maybe the police department or a detective office where it can be really scary for a child. So they do a great job of trying to get information, the information that they can with a 2-year-old. That can be very difficult because depending on the child, a lot of 2-year-olds aren't even verbal at that time. So I'm sure they went through that process with the forensic interview. It's usually videoed. It's videoed, and you'll have the investigator from the law enforcement agency, from the sheriff's office, will be there as well, and they can watch, and they are able to communicate. It's just a really wonderful process that they do at Children's Hospital to try to safeguard kids from being further traumatized by the interview process. But unfortunately, in this case, as he stated, that the child was just too young to be able to give any information. And that's why we need the public's help to get the information that they need to be able to close this case and to get justice for the child and for his mother and for Mr. Hill as well.
And, justice is I always say justice is on the way because the case is still open, and it just takes one person to help fit all of the pieces into that puzzle. If you're just joining us tonight, we're talking about Alexis Crawford and Herman Hill. They were both shot and killed back in May of 2012, and Alexis was pregnant at the time and a mother of a 2-year-old who was inside the home at the time of the shooting. The shooting happened on Reed Road, just outside of North Little Rock. Lieutenant Mike Blaine, I want to get back to you. The evidence that you have at the house. So let me back up. I know because there's a lot of things you can't discuss because it is an open case. Do you believe that there's somebody out there right now watching that has a piece of information that can help you fit that piece of the puzzle together to present a case to the prosecutor?
I always have hope in doing programs like this, that there's somebody that's watching, that, since 2012, there's quite a few years that we've put in between that crime that day to today. And just like all of us on this panel and all of us that are watching, we grow as individuals, and we grow, and our hearts change, and we're no longer maybe that harder person that we were at our younger age, or we got kids of our own, and they know about this particular crime, particularly the remarkable scenario of this 2-year-old being present during the time of his mother's murder. And you appeal a lot of times in these cold cases to the heartstrings of these individuals that know something. And, you know, life does that to us. As we progress in our own lives, we have our feelings change, our ideas of life change. And so I always have hope that there's someone watching that knows directly about this crime and says, you know, I've known about this. I've been wanting to talk about this for quite some time. And I never either had the opportunity or never thought, where should I go? Where should I start? What should I do? And that start begins with just coming to our front door and just talking to us. And it might be as little information as possible. You probably might think it's minute in the whole scheme of this crime, but in the reality of it, it's that one piece of information that takes us over that line, takes us over the edge, that puts us where we need to be for the prosecutors to do their job.
If you're just joining us, you're watching Monday Night Mystery. We're talking about Alexis Crawford and Herman Hill. If you have any information, call 501-340-TIPS. 501-340-TIPS. That brings you to Central Arkansas Crime Stoppers, and it goes right into the hands of the Pulaski County Sheriff's Office. I want to get back to Latricia Woodruff, law enforcement and a communications expert here. We were talking about the neighbor being able to provide critical information. Actually, Lieutenant Mike Blaine, this question's for you. I'm sorry. Was the neighbor helpful after deputies got on scene? Were you guys able to collect any information from him or her?
Are you speaking of the eyewitness?
The neighbor, yes.
The neighbor? Oh, absolutely. He remained on scene.
Very cooperative, okay.
Yeah, he remained on scene, was very cooperative with us, actually went back to our office for a formal interview statement, and was very very helpful in our case. Latricia
Woodruff, law enforcement and communications expert, where would investigators go from here? I mean, you have the 2-year-old who's been interviewed, you have the neighbor who's been interviewed. What happens next?
Well, he mentioned that there were some folks that they spoke with who were potential suspects in this case. And I would imagine, and Lieutenant Blaine can back me up on this, that they are continuing to watch those folks and continuing to ask questions surrounding them to see if maybe they can get more information about what happened. But they're not going to get tunnel vision as well. They're going to keep this wide open because there could be other folks who were involved in this, could be not even the people that they were looking at. But I would imagine that they're still going to continue to watch those people who were early suspects or persons of interest in this, while also remaining open-minded and following wherever the leads take them. He said that they haven't gotten leads in a while. Again, we're hoping that tonight's episode will help drum up some leads, and they will follow those leads where they take them and continue down the path. You have to think about this. She had a 2-year-old child who was in that house, thankfully unharmed, but there is an 11-year-old boy out there right now who probably doesn't even remember his mom other than from what his relatives are telling him and trying to keep her memory alive. But he doesn't have the benefit of having his mother. Someone decided to take his mother away from him. And if there's someone out there who is watching this, who knows something, think about that child. It's been over 9 years since this happened and no one has been arrested. I can't even imagine what that child has gone through, knowing that someone took his mother's life. So if you know anything about this, think about that child. That child was 2 years old, now an 11-year-old boy who does not have his mother. And if you have any conscience or feelings at all, that's gotta make you want to come forward and give information on this case. And just a little bit of information can go a very long way.
Yeah, it really can. It can be that piece that puts all this together, that Lieutenant Mike Blaine and his team can present a case to the prosecutor's office. I want to get back to Lieutenant Mike Blaine because Latricia brought up a pretty interesting point, and it's the fact that there are, I think it's safe to say, there's still persons of interest, right?
Yes, there certainly is. That list has not diminished or gone away for sure.
And you know, what is that protocol of following up or bringing them back in? Can you just bring them in? Can you ask them to come in? What's the protocol for when you have a list so short and years go on? What's the game plan moving forward?
Well, a lot of times it goes back to where you're reaching back out and talking to them. You can't compel someone to come in. You can't force them to give a statement to law enforcement. That's again kind of where it comes back to appealing to their sensibilities and their lifestyle now that hopefully has changed from then to now. And we still put in that process of contacting them and or following up maybe in another run with law enforcement in a different type scenario that we will, try our hand again at talking with them and see if they have any further information to give. Unfortunately in this case, they not really refused to talk to us, but wouldn't give us information at all.
Well, and not to mention Lieutenant Mike Blaine, obviously, the CID area. I used to work at the sheriff's office. The interview rooms, it's no Holiday Inn Express. It's no hotel. It's not an area or a room that people want to go in and be interviewed by detectives. So, but it sounds like this is something that you guys are still monitoring. I mean, their names are on your radar.
Absolutely. In every cold case that we have, if we have prime suspects or any suspects that we've talked to in that case, or persons of interest, I should say, they're always on our radar. They're always on our list. And so anytime we do have interaction with them, whether it's about that specific crime or another one that they're a part of, we still backtrack and go over what was talked, previously, particularly like in this case. We would still, again, appeal for more information from them if they're willing to give it.
Lieutenant Mike Blaine of Pulaski County Sheriff's Office, his division, leading the case into a double homicide, the murder of 24-year-old Alexis Crawford and the murder of 27-year-old Herman Hill. Lieutenant Mike Blaine, really appreciate your time tonight. Any final words as we wrap up?
Other than just the appreciation of your program and everyone else on the panel in reviewing these cold cases, because I think it's extremely important that we don't forget. We don't forget our victims, because they truly need justice. And that's what we're in the business for. That's what our mission is. And just hopes that there is that appeal to the public of those that do know that possibly could be involved, that there's no justice either for yourself until you come forward and give the information that you have. And so I just appeal to those individuals that may know, again, as minuscule as the information that they think that they do have, it could be a mountain of information that we need. Kelly Ward, former prosecutor, any final thoughts?
I was just thinking, this is actually a triple homicide because, as we know, Miss Alexis was also pregnant, and I believe she's about the middle of her pregnancy.
You're right.
And so in Arkansas, you can also charge a homicide offense for an unborn child if they're at so many weeks. I think I want to say 16 or 12, it might be 12 weeks of gestation. So I know that she was past that. And so there would actually, what a tragedy. It's a horrible, horrible tragedy that this woman was murdered, shot dead in the house with her 2-year-old. And she was also pregnant. So her unborn child was killed as well. So if anybody has any information, I would just, implore them to contact the tip line, to contact the sheriff's office, their local law enforcement, just someone to try to help solve this case.
Yeah, very good point, Kelly. This very well is a triple homicide investigation. Not sure how the sheriff's office would present that or what the prosecutor would decide on that, but obviously a very important conversation to have if the sheriff's office ever presents that case to the prosecutor. Latricia Woodruff, a law enforcement communications expert, final thoughts.
I'll say what I always say, Mitch, is that these cases aren't solved without people. They need people to come forward to give them information on this. It's very, very tragic. I was thinking along the same lines as Kelly was when I started thinking about her unborn child, that that child was lost as well. So that 2-year-old not only lost his mother, but he lost a sibling as well. And again, it's 9 years later, and this case needs to come to a resolution for that child who is now 10 or 11 years old at this point. So people like to say that the police aren't doing anything. Why can't they solve these cases? You know, police want to solve every case. They want a 100% closure rate, but they have to depend on people. So if you know anything about this case, please give them a call there at Pulaski County so that they can close this case and bring some sort of resolution to it and perhaps some closure to this family.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Latricia Woodruff, law enforcement and a communications expert, Lieutenant Mike Blaine, Pulaski County Sheriff's Office, and Kelly Ward, former prosecutor. All thank you for your time tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mitch.
Really appreciate it. And if you have any information, as Latricia had just mentioned on this case, as Kelly has mentioned, as Lieutenant Mike Blaine has mentioned, please call 340-TIPS, 501-340-TIPS. I'm bringing that number up again for you. That brings you to Crime Stoppers. Your tips can remain anonymous. It can remain confidential and help the Pulaski County Sheriff's Office bring justice to Alexis Crawford, her unborn child, and Herman Hill. That is it for Monday Night Mystery. I'm Mitch McCoy. I hope you have a good rest of your night. Be safe and have a good rest of your week. We'll see you back here next Monday for a new Monday Night Mystery.